Alright, so this is Sam for when you're watching this, and I have the pleasure of defending natural selection in two areas where intelligent design says it's wrong. The first one would be, let's say, gaps in the fossil record. So, what intelligent design is arguing there is if species change, right? So if a fish, it's a really bad fish, but whatever. If a fish evolves to be a frog, let's say, then there should be some. Well, if a fish, alright, so if a fish evolves to be a frog, I can't draw a frog, so bear with me. You know, like that. Frog. It's a really bad frog. Then, if a fish evolves to be a frog, then there should be some in-between animal that is a combination of a fish and a frog. However, seeing as there are aren't many transitional, or seeing as scientists haven't found them, natural selection or intelligent design people say that natural selection is wrong. Natural selection's response to that would be the following. Just because there aren't complete transitions in fossil records doesn't mean that the evolution didn't take place or isn't true. So just because there isn't a transition between, that's a really thick pen, a fish and a frog doesn't mean it didn't happen. There's still proof that the frog came from the fish. Second, it's very difficult for animals to fossilize, and not every species is really capable of fossilization. First of all, you need a hard substance, like something like bone, exactly like bone, that won't just decay really quickly. It can harden and fossilize, and it's also really difficult to fossilize. You need the right conditions, and it takes a long time, so it's very difficult for things to fossilize. However, on that note, there have been transitional fossils that have been found, like between birds. I can't draw a bird. That's a bird. And their dinosaur ancestors, which I don't know what they're called, but they were dinosaurs. That's not a dinosaur. But they had feathers and wings, and scientists have found, or paleontologists have found, transitional fossils between them. And there have also been, paleontologists have also found transitional fossils between whales and their ancestors. So there's pretty conclusive evidence that animals do evolve over time from one thing to another, and just because there aren't transitional fossils doesn't mean it didn't happen. But even if people aren't satisfied with that, we do have transitional fossils to show that they're wrong. So that's cool. Second argument I have is the creation of new species. Intelligent design argues that natural selection can explain how species change, like a fish with wings changes to a fish changes to a fish with wings, right? But it doesn't explain how new species appear. Like, it says, well, that fish went from a fish to a fish with wings, but still fish. So, natural selection's response to that is a term called speciation. Speciation is how scientists define different species, and there are multiple ways of doing that. It can explain it. Speciation basically says that species or things that look the same. Like if there are two, I'm just gonna use fish. If there are two fish, they're the same species. If they can, like a big fish and a small fish, they're still the same species if they can breed together and make babies. But if they can't breed together, right, that means that because according to speciation, they're no longer the same species because they can't breed together. And speciation also says that this happens either because of geological like differences or behavioral things. For example, there are fruit flies that have evolved so that some fruit flies only mate on apples, and some fruit flies only mate on bananas. And because of that, they can't breed together, so they're not considered the same species of fly. So that's a behavioral thing. And then there's also like geological separations. Like if say there's a mountain, right? There's a big mountain. That's a mountain. And on one side there are lions that only hunt gazelles. So the only lions that hunt gazelles. And on the other side of the mountain, there are lions that hunt only elephants. Elephants. So, after millions and millions of years, if neither breed of lions crosses that mountain range, eventually the lions that hunt elephants are going to get really strong because elephants are tough, big animals and they need to be taken down with a lot of, or it requires a lot of power to be take them down. Whereas the lions on the other side, who hunt gazelles, will become very fast because they need to catch up with the gazelles. So at a point, after a while, after millions of years of evolution, the lions, the really fast lions and the really strong lions won't breed, even if they were to cross that geological barrier, just because they've become so different that they wouldn't really recognize each other as, lions. They'd be similar, but because of the geological border or barrier, they have become so different in behavior or just the way they are that they won't breed with each other, and therefore they are technically different species. This probably sounds complicated, but it has nothing to do with natural selection, but it does. I reassure you, because in the lion example, the lions that evolved to be fast and the lions that evolved to be strong, both of those evolutionary traits would have come from natural selection, mutation, and then those traits being an advantage, the ones with the advantages survive, the ones with the disadvantages die out. So, because of natural selection, in combination with the geological barrier, the two lions can no longer breed together, so therefore they're different species of lion, but they have a common ancestor, which also ties into natural selection. That's what natural selection says. Different species can evolve from a common ancestor. And just like with the fruit fly example, where one species breeds on apples and one species breeds on bananas, natural selection has caused them to have that kind of behavior, and because of that, they can't breed, so therefore they're technically different species of fruit flies because of natural selection. So that's that. In terms of what I think... Alright, so what do I think about all these arguments and the responses to them in terms of natural selection defending itself. What I think is that natural selection, in both of my cases, has come up with very reasonable arguments or defenses that do stand up to what it said. In the Gaps in the Fossil Record, it's saying that that just because even though there aren't transitional fossils, doesn't mean that animals don't change over time, because we know they do. And it's also very hard to fossilize. Scientists have proven that. Therefore, it's just a matter of the fact that the transitional species never fossilized, or we just haven't found their fossils yet, and you just need to be patient about it. And in terms of the creation of new species, there are cases where natural selection has made different species who have evolved from a common ancestor and still look the same, different because of the way they evolved. In my opinion, I think that in both cases, natural selection has come up with reasonable responses that are completely just, they still stay, or natural selection has come up with responses that are good, and they are reasonable, and they really just stop intelligent design people in their tracks with their responses if you really take the time to think about it. So, in my opinion, like I said before, I think natural selection is a solid theory, and even though intelligent design has all these arguments against it, they're not good ones because natural selection has come up with responses and done them well.